The first time my daughter called her mom, I was standing right there, 5 feet away, close enough to hear it clearly, close enough to see my daughter's face light up the way it used to light up for me. Nobody warned me it was coming. It just happened, casually, the way the most devastating things in life always do. I smiled. I held my whole body together like it was made of glass. And then I walked to my car, sat in a parking lot I didn't even know the name of, and screamed until my throat gave out. That was the day I almost gave up. Almost. Stay with me until the end of this video, because what happened next most people never get to hear. And if you have ever loved someone so much it broke you, this story belongs to you too. I was not always a woman screaming in parking lots. I want you to know that first. I grew up in a small southern city where the summers were long and the money was short. My grandmother raised me, worked double shifts at a textile plant, came home with rough hands and an aching back, and still made sure I had clean clothes, a hot meal, and somebody who showed up. She didn't say, "I love you," easily. She showed it in packed lunches and front row seats at school plays when she could barely keep her eyes open. I watched her and thought, that is what strength looks like. I want to be that. I was the first in my family to finish high school with honors. I had real plans: nursing school, a house with a yard, 2 children who would grow up knowing without any doubt that they were loved. I wanted to give them what my grandmother gave me, that steady, reliable presence. I had it all mapped out the way young women do, before life teaches them how fast everything can change. I met him when I was 22 and lonely in a way I didn't fully understand yet. He was warm, attentive, and very good at making me feel chosen. And I wanted so badly to be chosen by somebody. He didn't come in like a storm. He came in like a season, gradually, the way cold weather arrives before you've realized summer is over. By the time I felt the chill, I was already deep inside it. I'm not going to dress this up. I made choices I'm not proud of, but I am also done pretending those choices happen in a vacuum, that they had nothing to do with what was happening around me, to me, inside me. Both things are true. I made choices. And I was also a woman who was drowning with no idea how to ask for help. The relationship became something I can only describe as surviving. There was control disguised as love, and there were days I couldn't tell the difference anymore. I lost my job, not because I was lazy. I had never been lazy a day in my life, but because I was managing chaos at home that I was too ashamed to explain to anyone. When the job went, the apartment followed, the way these things always follow each other like dominoes that have been leaning for a long time. I started using to quiet something inside me that would not stop screaming. I say it plainly because shame and silence are what keep women like me invisible. It started small, the way it always starts small, and then it wasn't small anymore. My daughters were 4 and 6. They were in the apartment the morning the neighbor made the call. My youngest was eating cereal at the kitchen table, little feet swinging because she was too small to reach the floor. My oldest was watching cartoons with her legs folded underneath her on the couch. That image is burned into me. I carry it every single day. The caseworkers came, and the apartment that had been chaotic and messy and ours suddenly felt like a courtroom. I remember one woman writing on a clipboard. I remember my oldest looking at me with her eyes asking a question I didn't know how to answer. I remember my youngest crying when a stranger reached for her hand, and I was completely unable to stop any of it, because I had made too many wrong choices for too long, and they had all arrived at once. They put my daughters in a car and drove away. I stood on the sidewalk and watched it happen. There are no words big enough for that moment. Something left my body that morning that took a very long time to come back. What nobody tells you about the child welfare system is how much of it happens in waiting rooms. You wait for court dates, for caseworkers to call back, for drug test results, for evaluations. You wait to be assessed and judged by people who have files full of your worst moments and very little else. I did everything on the service plan. Every single thing: drug treatment, parenting classes, therapy, stable housing, employment. I showed up early to every appointment. I answered every call. I did not fight the process even when it felt designed to grind me into nothing, because my daughters were on the other side of it. That was the only thing that mattered. The foster family had my girls. A woman and her husband, stable, a house with a yard, the exact yard I had always imagined for my daughters. I used to think about that yard and feel something so complicated I still don't have a single word for it. Not jealousy, not grief, something in between. The ache of watching your dream exist in someone else's life while you're still trying to earn your way back to it. I was allowed 1 supervised visit per week, 1 hour in a room with plastic chairs and a caseworker in the corner pretending to look at paperwork. I would plan those 60 minutes like they were the most important 60 minutes in the world, because they were. At the first visit, My youngest ran to me and buried her face in my neck and held on so tight I couldn't speak. And my oldest stood near the door with her arms crossed, her face doing something careful and complicated. She was 6 years old, and she had already learned to protect herself from me. I understood it. I deserved it. And it broke something in me that I'm still in the process of repairing. 6 months in, I was allowed to attend a school art show. I got there early. I wore the nicest thing I owned. I stood near the entrance and waited for my daughters to walk in. They came in laughing, holding hands with each other. That part hadn't changed. Walking in comfortably, like they fully belonged to that moment. Which they did. They deserved to. I knew that even then. The foster mother walked just behind them, smiling at something my youngest had said. And she looked kind. That was the thing that undid me. Not threatening, not triumphant, just genuinely, simply kind. My oldest stopped in front of a drawing on the wall. Her drawing, I recognized it immediately by the way she always made the sky come all the way down to meet the ground. And without any hesitation, she turned and said it. "Mom, look." She was looking directly at the foster mother. Her face was open and bright and completely unself-conscious. The foster mother leaned in, smiled, and said, "I love it, baby." I was 5 feet away. I kept my face arranged into something that looked like fine. I stayed for the rest of the event. I hugged both my daughters when it was time to go. I told them I loved them. I watched them leave. And then I walked to the parking lot and sat in my car, and what came out wasn't even crying. It was something older than crying, something that had been building since that Tuesday morning on the sidewalk. I screamed until there was nothing left, and then I sat in the quiet and had the most honest conversation with myself I had ever had. I could quit. That option was real. There were women who had been through exactly what I was going through who had walked away, not because they didn't love their children, but because the pain of loving them from a distance was too much to keep carrying. I understood those women completely. I did not judge them then, and I do not judge them now. But I thought about my youngest face when she ran to me. I thought about my oldest drawing, the sky coming down to meet the ground, and I thought about who taught her that, who sat with her on Sunday afternoons with crayons spread across the kitchen floor, and I made a decision in that parking lot that I have never unmade. I was not finished. I was broken, but I was not finished. I don't blame my daughter for calling her mom. Not for a single second. She needed a mother present every day, for breakfast, for nightmares, for every ordinary moment that children need someone to witness. I was there 1 hour a week. Of course, she reached for what was consistent. Love finds the available hand. That is not betrayal. That is a child surviving. And I had to learn to honor that instead of breaking myself against it. I found a recovery program run by a woman who had been through the system herself. Not as a counselor with a clean office, but as someone who had sat in the same plastic chairs I was sitting in. She looked at me like a person, not a case file. That sounds small. It was everything. Getting clean was not a single dramatic moment. I had to restart twice before it held. Twice I thought I had it, and twice I was back at the beginning, humiliated and exhausted, having to decide all over again whether I was going to keep going. The third time, something was different. Not because I was stronger. I think I was just finally empty enough of excuses to let something real take their place. I got a job at a commercial laundry facility, 6 a.m, folding other people's uniforms and tablecloths while the sun came up. Hard work, honest work, and I was grateful for it in a way only people who have lost everything can truly understand. There is something clarifying about simple labor when your mind is finally quiet. You fold, you breathe, you show up again tomorrow. I rented a room from a woman at my church who knew my history and believed in the version of me still being built. I wrote my daughter's letters every week, not full of promises I wasn't sure I could keep, but full of small truths. The bird I saw on my walk to work, the meal I was learning to cook, the songs that made me think of them. I told them I loved them in ways that didn't require anything back. They didn't write back, not for a long time, and I kept writing anyway. Because I couldn't be loud about my love anymore. So I learned to be consistent instead. That became my rhythm. Show up, do the work, write the letters, take the tests, attend the hearings, go home, do it again. Not glamorous, not dramatic, just the daily, invisible labor of a mother earning her way back one ordinary day at a time. 8 months in, a handwritten letter arrived. When I saw who it was from, I sat down before I finished the first line. It was from her, the foster mother. She wrote that my daughters talked about me every night, that my youngest slept with a photograph of me, one that had been in my oldest daughter's backpack the day they were removed. She wrote that she was not trying to replace me, that her role was temporary and sacred at the same time, that she was holding my daughters until I could hold them myself, and that whenever I was ready, she hoped we could talk. I read that letter 4 times. Then I sat with it for 3 days. I had spent 8 months building a version of this woman in my head that made it easier to keep going. In my mind, she had become the obstacle, the woman living the life that should have been mine. I had made her into something simple and convenient because grief needs somewhere to point, and then her letter arrived, and she was just a woman who loved my daughters and had the grace to reach out to the person she had every reason to resent. I did not deserve that grace. She gave it anyway. I called her. We talked for almost 2 hours. We both cried, not comfortably, but in the way that happens when 2 people are circling the same enormous love from opposite sides. She told me things about my daughters I hadn't seen in my 1 hour a week. My youngest had started collecting smooth rocks from the backyard. My oldest read under the covers with a flashlight long after bedtime. Small things, the things a present mother knows. Before we hung up, she said, "Just keep going." And I did. 14 months after that Tuesday morning on the sidewalk, I sat in a courtroom for the last time. Everything on the service plan was complete. Recovery program, parenting classes, therapy, stable housing, employment. My caseworker gave a favorable report. My tests were clean. I had done every single thing they asked, and then I had done more. And then the foster mother stood up. In that courtroom, with the judge watching and everyone in their places, she stood and spoke on my behalf. She said my daughters needed to be home with me. She said she had watched me fight for 14 months with the kind of love that doesn't quit. She said she believed in my ability to be the mother my daughters deserved. I sat very still while she spoke, hands folded on the table. I did not cry. Every last tear had been left in parking lots across the city. What I felt instead was something quieter, something that felt, for the first time in over a year, like solid ground. The judge approved reunification, a 60-day transition plan. I walked out of that building and stood on the steps in the afternoon light and took the first breath in 14 months that didn't feel like borrowed air. The first overnight visit, I made their favorite meal, bought the wrong cereal, forgot the juice my youngest liked, and none of it mattered. She climbed into my lap within 10 minutes and arranged herself there like she had never left. My oldest moved through the apartment carefully, recalibrating, observing before trusting, because that is exactly who she has always been. I gave her space. I told her I was glad she was here and let that be enough for the night. It was not a movie ending. There were hard nights. There were moments my oldest looked at me with eyes still deciding whether to fully return. I called the foster mother more than once, asking questions. What helps her when she has a nightmare? What is her bedtime routine? How does she take her medicine? The foster mother answered every question without hesitation. About a month after my daughters came home, we were in a grocery store and my oldest turned to me quickly and said, "Mom, can we get..." And then she caught herself. Her face went uncertain. She looked almost frightened, like she had done something wrong. I took her face in my hands and told her it was okay, that the woman who cared for her had loved her well and that love was nothing to be ashamed of, that her heart was big enough to hold more than one person, that I was not going anywhere. She looked at me for a long moment, then she leaned into me, right there in the cereal aisle, and I held her while people moved around us with their carts. And I thought, this is what I screamed in parking lots for. This ordinary, unremarkable, everything moment. I am still in recovery. My life is not fixed or finished, and there are still days that ask more than I feel capable of giving, but I'm present. Every single day, I am present. That is the promise I made to myself in that parking lot. It is the promise I have kept. If this story found you today, I don't think it was an accident. Maybe you know a woman right now fighting this exact fight in silence, writing letters that don't get answered, showing up to supervised visits, rebuilding her life from what the worst version of herself left behind. Tell her to keep going. Tell her the courtroom moment is coming. Maybe you were a child who lived something like what my daughters lived. Your feelings about it are valid, every single one of them. And if she is still here, still fighting, she never stopped loving you. Even from a parking lot, even when she couldn't show it the way you needed. Maybe you are in the middle of your own parking lot scream right now, wondering if any of this is worth continuing. It is. Not because it gets easy, but because the people waiting on the other side of your hardest fight are worth every impossible day it takes to get back to them. Share this video, because the women in these stories are usually too exhausted and too ashamed to tell it themselves. Leave a comment if it moves something in you, because someone else scrolling right now needs to know they are not alone. Keep going. The courtroom moment is coming. I promise.